Hello, and welcome to another very random episode of Pittsburgh Sports Memories. I'm your co-host Steve Wirt, and I'm joined by my other co-host.
I'm Tim Hannon.
And are you ready to get random? I basically spun the wheel of topics, and this is what they came up with. It's time to clean out the closet or the kitchen junk drawer here, and we just had like kind of a bunch of me and Tim had like fragments of ideas or stuff that maybe wouldn't make a whole podcast, but they aren't related. But hey, it's just going to be a bunch of stuff that happens. So this should be fun, huh? Do you remember when Jim Rooker walked from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh?
Yes, I do.
Well, here's the story behind that. So, in I think it was July of '89, there is a Pirate game. The Pirates are playing in the old Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia, and they are playing the Philadelphia Phillies. And in the first inning, they batted around and they actually scored 10 runs in the first inning. And there's been a couple other podcasts have done whole deep dives that are probably way too long or way too boring to watch. Quite honestly, I tried to watch it. It was like, oh my goodness, I'm falling asleep. But apparently that's a very like scoring 10 runs is like almost guarantees a win. So Jim Rooker said, boy, if they lose this game, I'll walk back to Pittsburgh. Just, because I think in the bottom of the first, I think they scored a run or they hit a double or something, the Phillies. And what ended up happening is I think a guy named Steve Jeltz hits two home runs that catapults the Phillies to a 15-11 victory. So the Pirates scored one more run the rest of the way. And unfortunately, the Phillies scored 15 the rest of the way. And, it just goes to show you never know what can happen in sports and baseball. And, but the more interesting part, but you got outside of the weirdness of the game. And what was funny is Pirates broadcaster Bob Walk was the starter who had a hand in giving up a bunch of
Uh,
runs in that game too. And Bob Kipper was a pitcher. Like I think I remember that was '89, and I think I remember that because I remember this game growing up, and I remember like me and my friend. I was over at my friend's house, and we were like 10-0. Oh man, let's go out to eat or something. Or we went out instead of watching any more of the game. And when we came back, his dad came, like, he dropped us off somewhere and came back. And he was like, oh, the Pirates are losing. And we're like, what? And like, huh? And so it was kind of like one of those deals. So it's very rare occurrence. And Jim Rooker, true to his word, actually walked all the way from the veteran stadium in Pittsburgh to um, Three River Stadium in Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia to Three River Stadium in Pittsburgh, a distance of 300 and some miles. I guess you can Google map it. And they couldn't walk on like the Pennsylvania Turnpike because you're not allowed. So he had to do like Route 30, which is
okay.
like the old Cumberland Trail. It's basically like an old Indian trail, the way. And it doesn't say, well, 300 miles, people do that. But you got to remember, in the middle of Pennsylvania, there's all these mountains. So he had to walk up and down all these mountains. And he did train a little bit, but he said his feet were really sore. He went through 4 pairs of shoes, and they did it in I think 13 days, which they did 24 miles a day. They walked, which that's really impressive to walk 24 miles a day. That's almost doing a marathon every day. I mean,
Yeah.
now they weren't doing a marathon in like 3 hours, but that was probably over 8 to 10 hours every day. That's pretty impressive. 2.5 miles 2.5 miles an hour, so not bad. Tim, do you think you could walk from here to Philadelphia, Tim,
Uh,
in 2 weeks?
so the distance, I think, even though it's really long, the actual mileage I could see potentially doing, but like you said, how it's more about how he had to do it because of the terrain and because of the roads, right? It wasn't like you
No,
were walking on a trail. You know what I mean?
right, because it's old Route 30, which I said,
Yeah.
which I mean, I think part of that was, well, no, Route 40 was built by General Braddock in the French and Indian War, but it's the same concept. They built those following old Indian trails because that's the way, they obviously knew the land better and knew the spots to get through. But still, and a lot of the roads didn't have wide, what you call like, what do you call the shoulders? The area where you didn't have it, and like it was some point, like Jim Rooker almost got hit by a truck. Like there was a big semi coming down, and like he had to get out of the way, but the truck slammed on the brakes because there was some horse and buggy or who knows what. How it is in Pennsylvania on those back state roads. They're fun to drive, especially in the fall. The foliage is beautiful, but the walk is probably a little more treacherous. So, but
Right.
good for. I think it raised over $100,000 for Pirates charities and children's cancer. So it ended up being a fun, and there are people like but on both the Philadelphia organization waved goodbye as he walked from Philadelphia, and the people in Pittsburgh were there, and they broke like a ceremonial tape at the end, and there was a big crowd, and I remember that. I remember commercials for it, like him, because they obviously did it for charity and raised a bunch of money, and they had to wait till October because they had to wait till the season was over to do it. But
Yeah, so I mean that was really cool because like you said, it was like, okay, hey, obviously everybody knew that was just like a throwaway comment, right? Oh, I'd walk home if the Steelers or the Pirates lost this game, and then they do. And for him to kind of like stick to that and then make it something that ended up being very positive. Good on Jim Rooker for that.
I think the other guy, there was another guy that walked with him. I don't know if he was like another commentator or whatever, but there was another person that did walk with him. So
Yeah.
good for them. And apparently he got blisters on his feet, which I would imagine doing 24 miles a day. I'm just impressed. I'm impressed. 24 miles a day that's a lot to do.
It's a lot. And I remember this game too, Steve, because I really hated the Phillies back then. And in
It was fun
1989,
when they were a rival, weren't they? Before we left the division, or
yeah, I mean, it was a fun rivalry, but I just that was like the Vaughn Hayes and Juan Samuel and Mike Schmidt had retired, I think, at that point. But
yeah,
I didn't like the Phillies. And 1989 was like a disappointing season because the Pirates had this great year in '88. They finished in second place. They almost made the playoffs, and you thought they were going to build off of that, and then they didn't. But then it's like, well, at least we're going to blow out the Phillies, and then they lose that game. And Steve Geltz, you
yeah.
mentioned him.
I think he had
Steve,
hit like 10 home runs in his career or something.
so I actually have it here. Steve Geltz played in the majors for 8 seasons. He hit 5 career home runs. 5. So to give up 2 home runs to Steve Geltz, I remember this. If you're into sports podcasts, if you're listening to this one, I'm guessing you are. A really, really great podcast is the 1988 Tops podcast. They go through every baseball card in the 1988 Top set and they tell the story of the player. And they did an episode on Steve Geltz and they talked a ton about this game because it was just so shocking. I'm pretty sure he wasn't even supposed to play in that game, or maybe he was
I think there was an
pinch hit.
injury, and he was more of a defensive infielder
Yeah.
than he
They,
was a.
they might have even put him in after they were losing 10-0. I can't recall, but the two guys that do that podcast, they did a really good job just detailing that
I think
story.
John Kruk played for the Phillies too. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So yeah, that hurt losing that game. But yeah, that story about Jim Rooker, him actually then walking back, that's kind of one of those like all time memories that will always stick because of that. So cool that he turned that into something positive.
So switching to to coaches almost interfering in football games. There's a shot of so in 1997 the Steelers were playing the Jaguars in Jacksonville, and unfortunately at that moment they were in a close game, and I do believe they were trying to kick a game tying or game winning field goal. Tim, was it? I think it was 17-19, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Steelers
Yeah,
drive. They're lining up for a field goal that's going to win the game if they make
yeah,
it.
yeah. And so when Norm Johnson kicks the ball, it gets blocked, and a guy named Chris Hudson for the Jaguars picks it up and is returning it down the field. And as he returning it, Bill Cowher channels his inner Woody Hayes And like he literally, if you watch the video, he cocks back with his fist. Like he wasn't gonna tackle him. He was literally gonna punch him. And he, thank goodness for Bill Cowher and the rest of us Steeler fans, he does not punch Chris Hudson, and he lets him go for. I don't know if he got fined for that because he really didn't interfere with the play, but it definitely was a bad look for Bill Cowher. And thank goodness he came to his senses in time. And so Chris Hudson, did he score? I can't remember.
Yeah,
If
he
scored.
did.
He
He
did score
scored.
a
It did.
touchdown.
I mean, it didn't matter. Like that was a last
Yeah,
second field goal. So
yeah,
even just blocking it ended the game. So
yeah.
it's like what Cowher was upset about is like, yeah, he blocked the field goal. That means, and that was a big deal because remember that was when the Steelers and Jaguars were in the same
Same
division,
division, yeah.
and
And
that
then
was
I think Cordell had they got the 4th and 8 call too, because I watched the highlights from this. They had gotten a penalty call on
mhm.
like roughing the passer, so they kind of gotten a little lucky to get there. And yeah, it was really could have been a lot worse for Bill Cowher. Could you imagine if Bill Cowher would have done that? He would have been run out of the league. He wouldn't have been allowed to
Yeah, I
coach
don't.
ever again.
That's a really good what if because what if he does tackle the guy or punch the guy? Like you said, it wasn't even a tackle. He like had his arm out to like
It was cocked. It was a punch. It was
yeah.
going to be a punch, Tim. You could, if you watch which you can't show you the replay on podcast, but yeah, you can see his arm was cocked. Like
Yeah.
I don't know how you punch a guy with a helmet anyway, but
Well, I don't think he was like to your point. I don't think he was like had a bunch of time to like process. Like,
yeah,
okay, he's running down the field now. If I wanted to tackle him, what would be the best way to do this? It was just one of those emotional and like I think we've all had those kinds of things where like we want to like ooh, like you're just mad about something. You're about to like, I don't know, throw your cell phone down to the ground because you're so mad, but you kind of stop yourself because you're like, well, then I'll need a new cell phone, right? Or something like that, right? I think it's just one of those moments. It just happened to be on national TV because that was a Monday Night Football game back when Monday Night Football was like the game of the week. And
yeah. What
so
happened to
everybody
that?
saw that.
Yeah, that was a big thing. It was. I mean, it wasn't really big thing. I don't remember. I don't remember the media making a big deal
It, it
out of it.
was it was so 1997 doesn't seem like that long ago, but in terms of 24/7 football coverage, there was no real internet back then.
Because like yeah too, like I watched the Sports Center clip of it and they don't even talk about it, like, and you
Yeah.
can clearly see that Cowher's about to do that, but they mentioned it on the broadcast too, whoever was doing Monday Night
Yeah,
Football back
they
then,
did. I remember it being a little bit of a thing, but today it would be
because
so
he didn't
different.
do anything, and it didn't interfere with the play.
He
I mean,
didn't, but remember when Mike Tomlin almost tripped the guy from Baltimore?
that's the next one on my list,
Okay,
so
so we can compare those two things because the
yes,
reactions are very different because of the
what
24 by
happened,
7
yeah.
football coverage and the internet and everything else. So
Yeah,
Steve,
Mike Tomlin in 2013, there's a kickoff, and I think the Steelers had scored. And I don't know, they hadn't taken the lead, but I think they had narrowed the lead. That Baltimore was up 13-0, I do believe. And Jacoby Jones is running back. Once again, I think this is another thing we'd covered in another podcast. And as he's running, Mike Tomlin is not, he's not all the way out in the field, but like I would say half his body is out on the field, and he's running up the sideline. He's not in the middle of the field, Jacoby Jones. And because he's running up the sideline, Tomlin gets in the way. But at the last minute, Tomlin realizes it and he moves out of the way back onto the sideline. But it's too late. Jacoby Jones has to kind of swerve into the field to play a little more than he would have had to if Tomlin hadn't been there, and he gets tackled. And that's that it, the Steelers end up losing anyway, 22-20. Tomlin talked about it on a podcast with Ryan Clark and I forget who else. And they said he said that he didn't realize he was standing on the field. He was watching the Jumbotron. He watched the kickoff and then he switched to the Jumbotron to see what was going on. And he thought that Jacoby Jones was running up the Baltimore sideline, not the Steelers sideline. And he didn't realize it until he saw himself on the big screen. And that's when he moved. And he was like, uh-oh. And he just moved real quick. And unfortunately, he did get fined $100,000 for that. And because I think that actually did affect the play. I don't know if Jacoby Jones probably scores. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. They could have awarded Baltimore a touchdown in that
They
situation.
could have. Yeah, they
It
actually
has
could
been
have.
done
Yep.
before. Like I think there's an incident where this is in college football where a guy ran off the sidelines and tackled somebody that was like in the open field heading for a touchdown, and they tackled him, and they're like, yeah, they just awarded that guy a touchdown. So
Yeah, it was
and
it was
this got way more coverage, and like there were internet memes and
right.
stuff, and like I remember like Tomlin was like like they'd have because he kind of shuffled, so there was like
Right.
little dancing Tomlin, and you
Yeah.
know
Yeah. It so again, and that was what, 2012 you said?
2013.
2013. And that was also a nationally, that was a Thanksgiving night
Yes.
game.
Yeah.
So again, the difference between 1997 and 2013 was not a ton of years difference. This wasn't like the difference between like the 40s and like,
Yeah.
but in today it was only what, a little over maybe 15 years. But it was a huge difference because by 2013 you had social media, and you had this 24 by 7. You have all these football talk shows on the radio and podcasts and NFL Network, and they have to fill up the entire week with football talk. So that was a way bigger deal only because of that. And really, when you think about it, what Tomlin did was just like absent-minded, kind of dumb. What Cowher did was like almost intentional, like he wanted to tackle the guy. So I think you're right. I think if Cowher does that 15 years later, it is a way bigger deal. It shouldn't have been, but it would have been.
All right. Switching. Well, we're gonna stay with football, but more off the field stuff. Um, so Myron Cope, we all knows to love him, right? And apparently Myron Cope one time gotten a little bit of a tiff with Danny Snyder, the former owner of the old Washington Redskins. I don't know. Well, I guess we can call them the Redskins, right? We're talking historically Washington football team, but it does play in. So I guess back in the old days, like in the 2000s, like remember like Washington. Well, they still aren't that good, but they really stunk. Like he would sign like remember he tried to sign like Bruce Smith and Deion Sanders and like a bunch of guys that were like well past their prime
They,
to
they
like
would
make
always,
this
they would always, every
super
year,
team.
yeah, every year they would win free agency. Like whoever was the biggest free agent, like one year it was like Albert Hainsworth. Remember that guy?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, the Washington signed Albert Hainsworth. Like they always won free agency, quote unquote, and then they just always stunk.
So, and they were never very good at like dealing with people. Like they just always seemed to embarrass themselves. Like they had that email scandal that eventually cost Snyder the team, and yeah, just a lot of bad. It is really bad ownership. Like how you screw that because they were really good. If you the Redskins or well, I don't even know what to call them anymore. That team down in Washington was really good way back, like with
Yeah.
Joe Gibbs. Like
Oh yeah.
they won 3 Super Bowls.
Yes. And they were always competitive. The 80s and
Yeah,
90s, they just, you could always count on them being one of the best teams.
I mean they weren't as good as the 49ers or maybe even the Cowboys in the 90s, but they were always in the mix, like you
Yes.
said. But anyway, so I guess during a game, Myron Cope decided like he would call the Cincinnati the Bungles when they were bad instead of the Bengals. So he started to call them the Red Faces, like you're red faced, embarrassed. It's an old expression for the if anybody is younger, which they probably wouldn't understand that. And I guess he just like Danny Snyder got mad, and Myron in his own Myron way said, if that boy billionaire, Danny Snyder, thinks he can shut me up, said Cope, he should stick his head in a can of paint.
Yeah, Dan Snyder actually sent like a
Yeah,
PR guy.
Steve Balducci up to the radio booth
Yes.
to tell Cope to knock it off.
In the
Stop
middle of a
calling.
game.
Yeah.
Like, imagine being that insecure and hung up about stuff that you're listening to the other team's broadcast and
How
upset that
would you
they're
even
calling you.
know? Yeah.
Well, that's because again, like I said, you have to, because you're that insecure and worried about what somebody's saying about you, that you're literally listening to the other team's broadcast and then sending up a guy in the middle of the game to tell him to stop. Like, what did he think was going to happen? I guess when you're a billionaire and you tell people what to do, you're just used to them saying yes, Steve, probably. Right?
Well, I guess that season too. I'm looking at this article. The Redskins PA announcer said Ravens fans suck when the Ravens were there,
Mm.
and they got fined for that to $20,000 for saying that. So
And they're worried about what Myron Cope's saying.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. Like it was definitely a weird organization there for a while. Hopefully the new owner can clean them up and bring them back to glory, because they do have a rather large fan base. Like they're probably one of the bigger fan bases in the NFL, quite honestly. And them not being good is really hurting the NFL because, I'm sure, this long you've probably lost some fans. So if they get good again, I think you'll see them, the fans will probably re-engage and stuff. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's sad. It's sad. I mean, they were probably for about 20 years there, they were probably the most toxic organization in maybe in sports. And that's saying a lot when you have,
The
you know,
Raiders
the
and
Cleveland Browns and the
yeah,
Pittsburgh Pirates and franchises like that. But they might have been the worst. And he was really at the center of all that. And they finally were able to force him out. I'm not sure what it took to do that because there was a lot of talk that like they wanted to force him out years earlier, but he had all this dirt on all the other owners, and that's why they couldn't do it. And I mean, it in the end, uh, Daniel Snyder really got his because he only got $7 billion to sell the team, so they
well,
showed they showed
yeah,
that guy
yeah,
that he's
yeah.
at home really sulking a lot.
Well, he doesn't own the Washington football team anymore. Remember
Yeah,
when he owned the Washington football team for like a season?
if you gave me $7 billion to not own something I owned before, I would not be too upset. But that's me.
Yeah, sticking with football, but here's something completely different. We're going to talk about some Pitt backup quarterbacks from the University of Pittsburgh. Tim, who doesn't love them backup quarterbacks? There's a gentleman named Luke Getsy, and I don't know if anybody remembers this guy. He played briefly for Pitt, and I found an Times article because I remember I was at this game. Nobody will remember this, but Rod Rutherford got in trouble because he broke a car window and grabbed a woman by the arm, and I guess they said that the woman threw a glass at him in the parking lot. I don't remember anything ever becoming of that besides. So Rod Rutherford's big punishment was, can you remember, Tim, what Rod Rutherford's big punishment was?
Was it one of those like he was suspended for the first quarter or something like that?
Yep. He was suspended for the first quarter against that major pit rival that we always look forward to playing every year, Kent State.
Uh, well, I'm sure he learned his lesson after that because to miss such a huge game and to miss a whole quarter
No,
of
no,
that
the
game.
first quarter of it.
Yeah.
So, so thus, this which brings in Mr. Getsy. Luke Getsy comes in and he wants to, impress. And he actually wasn't bad. And I remember like he threw a lot of passes right on the money, but the receivers kept dropping the ball. And I remember my dad saying he thought that the team was doing it on purpose. Now I don't know. I just thought maybe they just had a slow start. I get it was either I think it might have been the first or the second game of the season. So after the first quarter, Rod Rutherford comes in and throws like 4 touchdowns, and they take a 28-7 lead into the half. And Luke Getsy comes out, and he doesn't play much that the rest of that season. And then I think Harris quits after another year or two, and he's still floating around when Wannstedt comes and brings in, yeah, because he's sitting behind Tyler Palco, and instead of waiting for, I guess, Tyler Palco to leave, he just leaves and he goes to Kent, or he goes to Akron, I do believe, and he ends up being a starting quarterback for 2 years, I think in Akron. Let's see here. I have an article on that too. Yeah, he went to Akron, and because he didn't want to back up, because he knew it wouldn't be a fair. He was supposed to have a quarterback competition with Tyler Palco, but everybody kind of knew, like between him and Joe Flacco, but everybody knew that they were never going to get a shot. So Luke Getsy goes to Akron, has a pretty like mediocre to not great career with Akron, but more interestingly enough, he goes into coaching, and he goes and he ends up being he floats around for a while, and currently he is the offensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears. So keep that in the back of your mind for 1 minute, Tim, okay? Because he does come back and he coaches Pitt actually under Wannstedt in like 2010, I want to say 2008 to 2010, and he's like a defensive assist or offensive assistant of some sort. So the next quarterback we'll talk about is Andrew Janocko. He was a holder and backup quarterback for Pitt. He was from Clearfield. His father had been a head football coach at Clearfield for years. He basically didn't do much of anything at Pitt as far as quarterback wise, except for Tim knows the answer to this. There was a game against Cincinnati in 2009. Pitt had a huge lead and blew it, and they drive down the field with under like 2 minutes to go. They score a touchdown after like overcoming all kinds of bad penalty calls, and Pitt's about to at least tie the game, right? But it's a snap that really isn't bad. He drops the snap, and Pitt doesn't kick the extra point. And Cincinnati promptly goes down the field and scores and beats Pitt, and they go to the Orange Bowl and get
The
blown
Sugar
up
Bowl against Tim Tebow. Yeah.
Sugar Bowl and get blown up by Tim Tebow, right?
Yeah.
So whatever happened to Andrew Janocko? So he actually goes to Rutgers and works for Schiano for a couple years, and he ends up in Minnesota being I think like a QB coach or offensive assistant. And now guess where he is coaching a quarterback coach for? Guess what team in the NFL this season, Tim?
Green Bay.
He was with them, yes. But now he is with the other NFC North team, the Chicago Bears. So you have two Pitt quarterbacks coaching the Chicago Bears. That would be Andrew Janocko as the QB coach and Luke Getsy as the offensive coordinator. And you wonder why the Bears are having offensive trouble. Actually, they're not that. They've been doing well with that backup guy from West Virginia. So maybe it's more Justin Fields. I don't know. So it's just interesting that there's two backup. I think Getsy kind of knew Janocko from when he coached at Pitt briefly under Wannstedt, so maybe there's some connection there too. But good for Andrew Janocko and Luke Getsy, definitely finding a niche in NFL coaching, and I hope they have a long coaching career. It's good for them. We're staying with football, but we're switching gears here a little bit. So Tim, what would you think if every year we decided that the team that won the Super Bowl should play a team of college all-stars? What would you think of that?
I think it would make for good TV, and I don't know. I think I'd watch it. It would be interesting, but I don't see anybody's union. Well, number one, the players' union,
or like like Caleb Bloom, the guy who's like, what's a percentage of an NFL team is going to go out there and play like an exhibition game, right?
Right, and risk your draft health and everything else. Yeah, you'd never see anything like that, right?
So back in the 30s and 40s, they decided this was a good idea. And really, it was more of probably a benefit to the NFL than it was college. Now, just for some perspective, like college football dating back to like the early 20th century, like the 1900s, was much more popular than the NFL. It was considered a pure sport. The gambling wasn't considered as much. It was just the more talented players were considered in that, because a lot of guys didn't go to the NFL. They would just go, I guess, have a career or whatever. So the NFL was kind of conceived as this fledgling league of, barnstorm. And even if you look at the early NFL like franchises, the teams, where are the Decatur Staleys right now? They're gone, or the Pottsville Maroons, or so teams came and went. And, I think this is a way to kind of legitimize the NFL. And apparently, this game actually continued all the way to 1976, and that was the last one. And it featured the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were the Super Bowl champions, and they played the College All-Stars. And in this game, it was played in it was played in the summer, because that way both leagues would be not in season. And actually, with this, the pros only won 24-0. I mean, I realized the college team didn't score, but 24, you would think it would be that more of a blowout. And there was a torrential downpour. People were running onto the field. I mean, Frank Gifford called it a carnival. The game actually never even finished. They just called it in the third quarter. But it ran for a long time. It ran from let's see, I think 1934 to 1976. So it was like a 40-year tradition. And attendance at the 1947 game was 100,000 people. And it's kind of weird. Like, you would think this wouldn't be, but being a member of the College All-Stars was competition that as a kid I dreamed of. And that was Pro Football Hall of Fame receiver Paul Warfield, who played in the game as an all-star and with the Cleveland Browns. And actually, how they picked the team was kind of interesting. Was a panel of 30 sports writers would just choose the first all-star team. So it's kind of interesting. And then, I guess in 34 they put lights on Soldier Field, and everybody's like, "Ooh!" They actually got 79,000 people to attend that game. So, I mean, it's an interesting concept, but I don't think for football, like you said, it would work.
Yeah, I can see why it was popular. I mean, again, if they did that today, I think it would draw. I think people would definitely be interested in watching it. But again, we're now at the point where uh, preseason NFL games aren't taken seriously. Players don't even play in those most of the time. And then for the college players, the postseason or non-regular season games for them, they don't play in if they have any kind of NFL prospects. So even if you somehow got everybody to agree to that today, no one wants to play an exhibition game. They don't even like playing the Pro Bowl anymore for that same reason. No one wants to get hurt. There's too much liability involved. I think that would work better as like a NBA exhibition game. Like if you got like all like the
This is my idea for the NBA, because they're having this ridiculous. The NBA is having like an in-season tournament, which doesn't even make any sense to me. And now in soccer, what they have is they call it the FA Cup, and it's basically like, what the U.S. Open is in golf.
Mhm.
Like if you play golf, you can like tech. Now I suck at golf, and I know you're probably. If we could go out there and play a good enough round of golf, we could qualify to be in the U.S. Open, right, Tim? Right? That's how it works,
No.
right? What?
No, definitely not.
No, but I mean, conceivably, we.
I like if we were able to play that well, is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yes, of course, yeah.
Well,
I'm just saying I wouldn't, but yes.
Well, I'm not saying I could. I'm horrible at golf.
Right.
Yeah, I can't even play mini golf. But yeah.
No, you're right. Pretty
It's
much anybody can qualify as an amateur. Yeah.
So it's the same concept in Europe, only with FA Cup is like it could be 11 guys down the street that just play on Saturdays can play, and they play like a tournament. And they have it soccer in the United States. It's called the Lamar Hunt Open Cup. And so I think an open tournament on a basketball level would be incredible if you could get everybody to buy in, like an early season, like this time of year. Like if you could do everything from the NBA teams down to 5 guys from the rec center, get all the college teams involved, Like, and you just play it on, like, and it's just one and done. So it's literally one more game to your season. And, what are you adding? One more game to everybody's season. I mean, I guess the team that keeps advancing will have to play 4 or 5 more games, but normally what they do is the higher level teams don't come in until like the fourth or fifth round of the playoffs, so that you've already gotten rid of most of the amateur teams. But wouldn't it be cool to see like Duke or whoever the best team in college basketball play the LA Lakers or the
Yeah.
Knicks or somebody? And it's a one and done, so it wouldn't, like, yeah, somebody could get hurt, but it's only one game.
Oh yeah. No, it would be interesting. It'd be interesting to see, football Georgia take on the Los Angeles Rams or something like that. But you're right. It could gimmicks like that could work in basketball because you don't or soccer
Or hockey,
because
hockey even maybe.
uh,
Well,
may,
I don't think hockey's as popular. I think basketball would be the
yeah,
perfect one
yeah,
for us.
but it can only work because those sports they're physical, but you don't have the risk. Football, I mean, any given play, somebody can blow out their knee, and that's the end of their. If you're a college player, that's the end of their NFL dreams potentially.
Yeah.
And if you're an NFL player, imagine if you're again like the Steelers in 1976 playing in that torrential downpour. Imagine if Joe Green blows out his ACL in that game, and then you're hosed for the next season. I mean, that'd be awful. So they didn't really think about stuff like that back then, but that's the kind of stuff that where you just would never see it today. So you're right; it could work in basketball or soccer. You'll never see something like that again in football. So that's definitely an interesting thing that they used to play, but you'll just never see it again.
Well, sticking with things that are totally random, the Penguins and Islanders, they've played a lot of interesting series and games. And let's see, what year was this? This was, let me look it up. Eh, Well, basically, what happened was there was a lot of fights. And I'm not sure what all started it, but I think they say it was a hit on Rick DiPietro by, okay, it was 2011, and the game before this game when all heck broke loose was, I think, Rick DiPietro, the goalie for the Islanders, who was like their top pick, and I think that didn't they sign him to like a 10-year
Yeah,
contract,
10-year contract. Yeah,
and he was never all that great. He was like
no, but
here
he was
for,
he was like their when you have a 10-year contract for a guy, and this is before he had kind of been flushed out as not going to work. At that point, he was like literally like their like expensive vase that's in the middle of the room that you do like keep the kids away from. Don't mess with this because that literally was like the Islanders' entire future was in this kid. And so to your point, when things start going sideways with perceived physical acts towards the goaltender, that's why it ramped up as quickly as it did.
yeah, a couple people kind of nudged him, like Matt Cook kind of hit him, but that was the dirtiest. But then DiPietro comes out and like decides to fight Brent Johnson, and Brent Johnson knocks him out. And I think he was out for, like, he was always hurt. That was his biggest problem.
Right.
He was just like always hurt. And like that wasn't like, okay, what was Brent Johnson supposed to do? Not fight him? I don't know. So the Islanders were really ticked off about that. And so on the next time they played on February 2nd, the Islanders definitely were looking for the Penguins. And it was just ridiculous. I mean, everybody got in a fight with everybody. I think they had the guy Gillies. He knocked out a Penguin and like was literally standing on the doorway because they had kicked him off, but they hadn't pushed him. Like he was standing in the doorway of like where you come in, and was like yelling at the Penguin, who was like out cold on the ice. And it was like they came, like, for some reason, like Brent Johnson started the game, got pulled, and then got put back in the third period. And it was like literally just so the Islanders could fight him. I think by the end of the game, the Penguins only had 2 guys left on their bench. I don't have a total of like how many penalty minutes were given out in this game, but Yeah, it was a lot. I remember this game. I think that there was a lot of fines handed out. And it's weird to think that like the Penguins and Islanders really like you could see like the Philadelphia Flyers or like who's like another goon team. Like I don't know, the Islanders aren't necessarily like a team that goons it up, or like I don't know, Toronto or somebody like that, like that kind of goons it up a little bit. But it was definitely kind of out of character, and for this series, out of character, and that was Dan Bylsma's team, which they weren't always the most disciplined. The Penguins, I think, ended up losing the game like 8-2 or something. So it was an interesting. It just like so many fights and just over like not. It just kind of spiraled out of control very quickly. It was just a weird game with. It had to be over 100 penalty minutes just in one game.
Yeah, it was really ugly. It was kind of a callback to another era. It was like 70s hockey,
It looked
where
like
you
something
had.
out of Slapshot out of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Something out of Slapshot. I mean, it's really what it was. And you're right, there was a ton of fines. I think there might have been some suspensions. I mean, the league
Well,
had to get
somebody came
control
off
over
the
that.
bench to defend Brent Johnson, one of the Penguins, and I
Yeah,
know that's an instant like one
right.
game suspension.
Yeah, they kind of had to get control of that because those two teams are in the same division. They had to play each other more that year. They couldn't. I mean, it was a complete farce. I mean, it was like a playground thing where it's like these group of kids are mad at these group of kids, and they're just going to keep fighting until a teacher steps in and physically separates them. And that's what it was. It was really really ugly. And like you said, it wasn't necessarily like one person's fault or you can't trace it back to one exact thing. It just was one of those things where it just kept ramping up, and then it turned into this just absolute melee
I think there was
of
one Islander
fights.
that got in two separate fights during the game. How
Yeah,
do you?
yeah.
And like Brent Johnson gets pulled and then gets put back. What was Bowsman doing? Like,
It was just a combination of like you said, the Penguins of that era were very easy to rattle. Like we talked about that before. How that Bylsma team in that era, you could just get under their skin very easily. You combine that with again the prized possession goaltender for the Islanders getting punched in the face, which it was his choice to fight.
yeah,
And Brent Johnson, I mean, that Brent Johnson will no 30 years from now, I can't tell you one important save that Brent Johnson made, but everybody will remember that he's the guy that fought Rick DiPietro, and so the combination of all those things is just what led to that. And the funny thing about it, Steve, though, like typical to hockey, it was this huge thing. It was everybody hated each other. And then like the next time they played, it's like, okay, well, we're over it.
they got it out of their system.
They got out of their system and now yeah, we're fine. It wasn't like you would think that would have lasted like years and years or at least months and months where it's like, oh, these two remember like the Red Wings and Avalanche back in the 90s. It was years of that. Every time they played each other, it was like, oh man, they're gonna fight and Claude Lemieux and Draper and all these guys. Remember that? Like
Yeah.
that's what you would have thought this would have turned into. And it was over before it was over in that one
I
game.
think sometimes, like, if you just have a big blow up like that, everybody gets the energy
Yeah,
kind of leaves
maybe.
the room and it just
Yeah.
gets it out of their system.
Yeah.
At least with men, I mean, whoops, there I go again. But
Yeah. I'm not going to agree with whatever you're going to say next for
I'm
fear of.
going to talk about Coach K yelling at a crowd of Duke
Okay,
students.
let's pivot. Yes.
Yeah. So Coach K's was a coach at Duke basketball for years and years and years and years. And how many national championships he win down there? 5,
It
4,
was
20,
5.
16 and a half. I don't know. He won a lot. Iconic game, Christian Leitner hitting that shot over Kentucky or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
So apparently, because Pitt Duke is such a big basketball rivalry. I mean, it's almost on the level of Duke, North Carolina, sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, think about all those years of
I mean,
the
Levance Fields
ACC.
hit that shot in Madison Square Garden at one time. That was
Right.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, there was at one time like Duke came up that when Jamie Dixon was here and like Pitt had been winning a lot of games in the ACC, and you don't do that because it's just there for football, and you're supposed to be a doormat in basketball. And how dare you not be a doormat in basketball and beat like Clemson and teams that aren't good really traditionally? So they had to send Duke up here to teach us all a lesson, and a lesson we were taught. But this is not that game. So like I guess for some reason, like I know the fans in that, what they call them, the Cameron Crazies, which is the
Hmm.
student section, and that they're what a Cameron is, a Cameron Field House or whatever the name of
Yeah,
their,
their arena. Yep.
whatever their, it's probably a name of like, Expedia.com or something now, but so whatever the name of that stadium is, they sit there and they do stuff like I've heard of, like when the visiting team comes out, they'll sit there and read the newspaper and act like they don't exist, and just like normally like more clever stuff like that. But apparently they were yelling. This is when Jeff Capel was the coach and Duke was ranked ninth, and Jeff Capel is the coach of Pitt, and he had played at Duke and been an assistant and fairly successful and I guess well liked, right?
Hmm.
Down at Duke. Like,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, in the night.
yeah.
So full disclosure, I was a huge Duke basketball fan back in the
Well, then
day.
maybe you'll be add some more context because I don't really understand this at all. But yeah.
Yeah, but Jeff Capel, when he played for Duke, it was like the mid to late 90s. It was after Christian Laettner and Grant Hill and Bobby Hurley and all those great teams that had won national championships or in the Final Four. And Duke kind of had this lull in the mid 90s where they didn't really have very good teams. They got it back together in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and they won another national championship in 2001. But in Jeff Capel's time, he was kind of like the poster child of really good Duke player that they had always gotten, but he didn't really have a good team around him. He was a good player, but that was just he was there at a bad time.
So that's the background. So Jeff Capel comes back, and I guess when an opposing team comes with like a player or a coach that used to be at Duke, obviously they would have been an assistant coach, not a head coach. I guess the fans yell "sit with us" or something. Is that some sort of Duke talk
No
too?
idea. I don't get what that means, but sure.
Does that mean come back to Duke? Does it mean sit
I
with
don't know.
us? This your team that you're so I don't. It must have had to be something else that was said, but that in the media, that's what they're saying. That's what they're saying was said, and so maybe there was something else that was more insulting. But in the middle of I think after the halftime or something, Coach K goes and yells at his own fans, the student section, saying to stop that, and then goes to the Pitt bench and apologizes to the Pitt coaching staff and players for this. So I think it's something was said more serious than that. So I don't know what was said. That there's never been any reliable media reporting, but apparently enough to. I mean, I don't think like Coach K never really did stuff. He wasn't Bobby Knight throwing chairs and stuff like that. So I, I don't know. I don't know, Tim. Any clue what that was about? You're more of a Duke fan than I ever was. Or
Yeah. So I think probably I
there had to be something else that was
yes,
said.
I'm sure. I mean, he's right by the student section, so he's hearing everything, right? And the Pitt coaching staff is hearing everything. So I'm sure something else was said that we don't know. Something obviously really upset Coach K, and I think, like you said, he wasn't Bobby Knight, right? He wasn't one of these guys that yelled and screamed. And I think what happens, I think to me, the big advantage of having that kind of personality is whenever you do get angry about something, I think people tend to take it more seriously, if that
They're
makes
like,
any
hey,
sense.
something's really, yeah. It's like the guy that never misses work. It's like
Right.
when like you have the guy that always misses work. You go, oh, Joe, he's late again. And
Yeah.
then like you got the guy that doesn't miss work. Like, oh, Joe, whoa, what's wrong? Something must be going on. He must be
Right.
really sick or something.
Right. So obviously, him getting upset there had to have been like a better reason. It wasn't like he just flew off the handle there. And then, kudos to him for defending the Pitt coaching staff. I will say that you have to wonder. I mean, Jeff Capel was his guy. If that were Kevin Stallings, right, or some other Pitt coach, does
Yeah,
Coach
probably.
K
Yeah.
still get upset and still yell at the fans? I don't know. You'd like to think that it was more about the principal than it was about the person, but certainly Jeff Capel was his guy. Again, had coached him, he had been an assistant coach. There was some talk. It's at one point of Capel, because Coach K was, getting up there in years. There was some talk of Capel, potentially taking over at Duke when Coach K retired. So I think that again, if that's not his guy, I don't know that he has the same reaction. But anyway, kudos to him anyway for sticking up for the Pitt coaching staff.
Yeah, I don't understand it, but hey, whatever. Yeah. Coach K, definitely a class act compared to some of the other basketball, such a skiing sport at the college level. So all right, switching to something totally different. And I don't know if we've ever covered this before. Stop me if you've heard this before. So we're gonna talk about the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I'm actually gonna play a
I think we've
video.
talked about the Pirates before.
Yeah. At least leaving Pittsburgh. Okay.
Or twice.
What's that?
I think once or twice we've talked about
Yeah.
the Pirates. That's the baseball team, right?
Yeah.
That plays
Yeah.
here.
And they were gonna leave Pittsburgh there for a little bit. And this is like 1981, and the Pirates are rumoring to be talking to another town named New Orleans. And apparently some representatives of the Louisiana Superdome came up and talked to the Pirates president Dan Galbraith for 2 hours and attempted to steal them away to said Louisiana Superdome. So I'm going to share. This is it's really a cool report by Adam Long on Channel 4. So I'm going to play the report by him.
Usual at the stadium yesterday, but the behind-the-scenes maneuvering attracted more attention. Pirate President Dan Galbraith met with the executive director of the Louisiana Superdome for 2 hours and then told reporters something has to break in his dispute over the terms of the stadium lease.
But those that we've tried to talk to don't really appreciate what a major league franchise means to a city. They've taken it for granted. And they say, well, the Galbraiths can afford it, so let's don't worry about it. I'm telling you, we've come to the end of that road. And if they think there aren't viable alternatives out there, there might be some very surprised people.
This morning, Mayor Caligiuri wasted no time in blasting what he called an illegal move by that New Orleans group.
The federal court that we filed the suit in is saying to them, and I'm saying to the city of New Orleans, to butt out of our business. We have a binding agreement between the Pittsburgh Pirates and the city of Pittsburgh to the year 2000, and that under this lawsuit and under a point of law, a third party is not permitted to try to entice one of those parties to either leave or break that lease. So very simply, I'm telling them to stay out of our business. We'll work out our differences up here. If they want to come to Pittsburgh, let them buy a ticket and watch a game.
That produced this reaction from Pirate Marketing Director Jack Schramm.
Our feeling is this: the New Orleans people came up. They came up to talk to really the whole world of baseball and to say that if there's ever a franchise available, they'd be interested in having it. But they also said they're here with a big if, and they'll talk to us again. There's nothing scheduled. They'll talk to us again if something should happen in our court case. So I think all that has really been settled, that they're just waiting to see if anything happens. If it does, they're interested. If it happens in another city, if it would happen before Pittsburgh, they'd go that direction. They're really talking to the world of baseball on it.
One wonders what the great Pirate shortstop Hannes Wagner would have said about all this. The ball club suing the city, and now in this lawsuit, the city suing another city. Veiled threats to leave, warnings you better not, and the possibility on top of all that of a players' strike at the end of next month.
Boy, what a great report, though.
Yeah, it went and a great forgotten story.
And I love Mayor Caligiuri, man, giving them the business.
Yeah,
Hey,
suing
leave us
the
alone.
city of New Orleans. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean,
So what, they were going to play baseball in the Superdome?
well, sure, they played baseball in the Astrodome and the Kingdome and this.
I mean, can you do that? Is the Superdome set up to do that?
Uh,
I guess it could be.
I guess it was. Yeah.
I mean, they play baseball in that ridiculous dome down in Tampa, so
Right.
it can't
Right.
be any worse than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and it was interesting. I mean, obviously the Pirates were pulling a little bit of like the Mario Lemieux going to
Yeah.
Kansas City thing there. Like, oh well, hey, we're just saying, hey, if something opens up, they're interested. So hey, we were
That
just
would have worked
listening.
too. The New Orleans Pirates, they wouldn't have to change the name at all.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, they obviously they were just there was some positioning on their part. But then, yeah, the city's like, nope, you're not. That like,
2000, and that was 1981. They had that was like what, a 20-year agreement.
yeah, yeah.
And but they ended up, the Galbraiths ended up selling anyway, didn't they?
Well, they did, and I think the remember what Caligiuri was saying was the agreement was that not necessarily that the Pirates couldn't get out of it. The agreement was that other cities weren't allowed to come and make offers and entice them to come. That's what he was upset about. That's what he was suing the city of New Orleans for, was that the agreement is binding where you can't just come up and be like, hey, you guys interested in playing in the Superdome? Because we would like to have a baseball team.
Yeah. And how many baseball teams does New Orleans have as of this day?
Well, yeah, they never did get their baseball team, I guess.
Although they're talking about expansion, but nobody ever mentions New Orleans. They mention Nashville more than New Orleans.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, but that's a great find, because that's one of those things that I
It's all you,
certainly
Tim. I can't take credit for that.
I certainly don't
stole that.
remember
I
that.
totally
And
stole that from you. But
oh, did you? Okay, was
well,
that?
you posted it on there? Yeah.
Oh, okay,
It's,
okay. Well,
great find.
great
by
find
you.
by me then.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that again, nobody would ever really remember, uh, uh, unless you just kind of told that story. It's just one of those things that I don't know where the lawsuit went, or it was probably just more political posturing than it was anything. I would
No wonder
guess.
my dad loved Richard Caligiuri. He loved Mayor Caligiuri.
Hmm.
It's stuff like that, and he paved the street in front of our house. Our street was brick in front of our house until 1986, and like he literally, yeah. And then he died in office. So sad. And it's funny they would be building them a stadium less than 20 years later.
It's true. That's a good point.
He did kind of start that too, like with the public, right? Like the Galbraiths, that was the way things have gone, is like, the public pays for the stadium. Like owners figured that out, that the white elephant is the facility and the money maker is the team. People are going to come and see the team. It doesn't matter where they play. It does, but it doesn't. So.
And the threat of another city, right? That's the other thing. That's the always the X factor. It's like, oh well, if you're not going to take us seriously, then we're going to listen to these people from this other city.
Well, that's all I got for this episode, Tim. It was definitely a lot of stuff that happened. It wasn't random enough for you, Tim.
Yeah, good kind of some of those stories, like we said, just stuff that
I don't
people
think
probably
don't
don't remember.
30 minutes on the Pirates in New Orleans, or an hour on the Pirates in New Orleans.
Right. No, these are all.
I could have tried, but
no, you're right. You couldn't have done a whole episode on any of these stories. These are all.
Luke Getsy is worth an hour just on
Yeah. Let's analyze the Chicago Bears offense. That would we'd get lots of downloads on that episode.
Well, thank you for listening, and thank you for letting us clean out our kitchen junk drawer here. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, give us word of mouth and check us out on all your podcast services, and recommend us on Facebook or whatever, social media you can. And thanks for listening to all these, a couple years now. And we'll see you next time here on Pittsburgh Sports Memories.